Welcome to our AI show featuring industry experts Kevin Kieller and John Arnold. And today we're going to be exploring how generative AI has transformed the world of enterprise technology. So since the explosive debut of OpenAI's ChatGPT in late 2022, AI has rapidly evolved from lab experiment to mission-critical enterprise utility. So from productivity and collaboration to unified communications and customer experience, generative AI now powers intelligent assistants, autonomous agents, and even smarter workflows. So in this episode, Kevin and John are going to be breaking down the biggest milestones in AI innovation, and they're going to reveal how they're shaping the future of work, communication, and customer engagement. So here's your essential guide to the key breakthroughs and business use cases driving this generational shift. But before we do, let's first discuss some of the latest headlines and news from the big events. Kevin, how's it going?
It is going well, Rob. And as always, there is no shortage of AI news, which I don't think is a surprise.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the challenge is actually just try to stay in our lane or two, I suppose, with AI news. But yeah, we've got lots to talk about today. But I suppose one interesting bit of news that I picked out first of all, Kevin, was in fact Meta's recent event. It was their inaugural event, LlamaCon, but at their headquarters on April 29th. Did you manage to catch that?
Yeah, I mean, I caught the news out of it. I didn't watch it live. I mean, I love llamas. I was in Peru kind of last year, so I saw llamas in the wild. And I think that's always exciting. So lots of great announcements. I mean, Meta and WhatsApp. I mean, WhatsApp, that is the most popular messaging platform in the world. So anytime they do anything, and they made a bunch of announcements, it impacts a whole bunch of people.
Yeah, it's interesting where Meta's going with this. I mean, I picked out a story from AI today from Luke Williams, just a kind of summary of the event. But I was just thinking, it does feel like they're trying to kind of almost use a lot of the other products and like WhatsApp and the Meta View application that comes with Meta Quest headsets and Ray-Bans and things like that to almost kind of Trojan horse the Meta AI into the user base. And they've got a huge user base, haven't they? I mean, WhatsApp's got like 3 billion or more users now. And even there's like 20 million or more Meta Quest headsets out there. So I just think, things are maybe coming together for Meta in some ways, but their AI story, their AI vision is certainly something to watch, how they ultimately get that mass adoption that everyone's looking for. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think what's interesting is, they're trying to carve out the open source space. I mean, so they're trying to play it a little bit different and say, hey, we're the leading open source provider. I think that that's interesting. I think that, when they turned on their Meta AI inside of WhatsApp, there was a lot of articles about how to turn it off. I'm not sure. I appreciate all vendors want to leverage their base. And as you say, whether it's 2 billion or 3 billion, kind of active users, there's like at least 100 million in the US alone. So they've got this huge user base. Is turning things on by default the right thing to do? I don't know. There's a little bit of pushback. And certainly, like if you look at like Zoom with AI Companion, once again, they include that at no additional cost, but by default, they leave it off, which I think might be the way to go based on just the news stories that came out after WhatsApp had that little kind of bluish circle that showed up everywhere.
Everyone's trying to turn it off. How would I disable? I think that search must have been trending for weeks and weeks. But it is interesting, isn't it? And even the Meta AI, Meta Ray-Bans. I love the pair that I've got. And with a recent update, I just did it. It plugged in all the Meta AI capabilities, or at least the start of the Meta AI capabilities. And I love the fact that now it can use the camera to identify something and things like that. So it's coming. I just think, that phrase I heard a lot, I suppose last year was magnet or mandate. do you mandate AI on the users, or do you do what ChatGPT and ultimately use a big magnet, because it was such a great platform? So it will be interesting to see how this rolls out, but certainly mass adoption is here now for AI, I think, and there's lots to go at with Meta's story. I think their whole journey with AI is going to be interesting, how it kind of plays out across some of those other products that they've got in their portfolio. So interesting times. But another story that I picked out from Luke Williams on AI today was, I love the title, it's Zero Hoots Given. Duolingo chooses AI over human contractors. and this particular story, as we know, Duolingo is a huge language learning platform. Translation must be something that they've invested an enormous amount of money in. But this was a really interesting story from this, and the CEO is being quite vocal on the fact that they're going to be using AI more and more across the business. Kevin, what were your thoughts on that story?
Yeah, so I thought this was very interesting. I mean, the CEO, Louis Van On, I mean, he, to your point, he said, like, look, we're going to leverage AI. Like, the time is now, it's already happening. The proof point that he talks about is it took them 12 years to build 100 courses, and now in 1 year with AI, they released 148 new courses. So I think he also talks back to when in 2012, I think, Duolingo made a huge bet on mobile and says, hey, that was really what drove our business. And now is the time to make the bet on AI. So, I mean, I definitely understand and really support his perspective on this. I also understand that, now with this announcement, there has been pushback. People have said, oh, the quality has gone down. The thing that I found most ironic was there was a lot of stories about this that were actually generated by AI. So you have people that are complaining that Duolingo is using AI instead of humans, but in fact, the journalists are actually often using AI to craft or, most of the story, right? So, I think that this is coming, and, yes, there may be some degradation in quality, but like, one thing that I want people to keep in mind is humans are imperfect as well. So I think that on social media, a lot of people went searching after the story for examples of where the translation may have been not as correct or slightly inexact. But, maybe if they had done the searching, 6 months ago when it was all human based, I think that they also could have found those examples. And the last thing is, Louis, the CEO, he did say, look, we're getting rid of contractors, but duos, which they call the employees. We're not trying to get rid of the employees. And while I do a lot of contract work, so I have sympathy for contractors, the truth of the matter is, I think most organizations, they use contractors to kind of deal with excess need, and they kind of scale up and scale down. And if AI serves that purpose, I mean, I think a lot of organizations, which we're going to talk about further, are going to leverage, AI and AI agents going forward.
Yeah, and that is the AI conundrum, isn't it? Is using it, I suppose, getting there first, being first in your market, whatever that market that is, to differentiate themselves with AI. But there is these risks are underlying. Yeah, an interesting story on AI today. The third story that I picked out was it was published on Tech Radar, and it said over half of UK businesses who replaced workers with AI regret their decision. Now, I found this story really interesting, especially, as we're going to be talking to John very soon about the AI moments across the last 2 years, right, and what's really impacted organizations. But this one is a really interesting story that talks mostly about 55% of these companies that they surveyed regretted making the redundancies that they've made on the back of deploying AI. So, Kevin, let's dig into that story a little bit more, because there's some quite interesting insights from that research. Tell us more.
Yeah, Rob, I think that, yeah, absolutely. It was very fascinating. I think, like all statistics, there was some very different kind of feels from the people that they surveyed. So I kind of went deep, as I typically do, and looked at the kind of the wholeness of the survey. Um, so the interesting thing is that 72% of business leaders in the same survey said that they think AI will be, and this is even after maybe making inappropriate decisions or ones they regret. The 72% said this will be the most transformative piece for their workforce. So even after saying, hey, maybe we didn't use it appropriately or made some, kind of decisions that we regret, going forward, three-quarters say that this is going to be the, kind of a huge kind of transformation inside of the workforce. And then the other stat, and there was lots of interesting ones, so everybody can, read all the details, but 23% of business leaders admitted that they did not know how to use agentic AI effectively. And I would argue that the other 75% were lying because, we're going to talk about AI, agentic AI agents. And I think that these are early days. And so, yes, companies are experimenting. Yes, perhaps they're, applying AI where it doesn't work as well as they would hope. But I think that, I wasn't surprised to see this. And I think that this doesn't mean don't use AI. I think it just means, kind of do experiments and move cautiously.
Yeah. And I think just to underscore that story, I think there was another stat that I just like to pick out, which was 80% plan to increase their AI investments in 2025. So despite all the hard difficulties and challenges and everything
Right.
else, they're still going to continue investing. So yeah, a really interesting story, but I'm sure
Great point.
lots of stats like similar to that out there right now. But the fundamentals are it's evaluation, and implementation, adoption is where the biggest challenges are right now. So we're going to talk about that more and more. But Kevin, speaking of decoding some of these opportunities that we've got, let's go into the AI minute. What word are we talking about today?
So great. Yeah. So Rob, today, I've previously talked about grounding, but I keep hearing work grounded versus web grounded come up. And I think that it will be relevant to our ongoing discussion. So let me just talk a little bit about that. So a work grounded AI assistant has access to all of your relevant work information. So this could be things like meeting summaries and your chat history, your email, your calendar. If you're a Microsoft Shop, SharePoint, or whatever your file repository is, your contacts, and maybe even your interaction story. So when I say, hey, I would need a meeting with John, it knows that it's more likely that I'm talking about John and Arnold because we're both members of BC Strategies, right? So that's work grounded. Whereas web grounded, if your AI assistant is web grounded or your AI agent, it means it has access to the general knowledge from the internet. And so here's the key point. Ideally, you want both, but you need to understand, when and where your AI, what context it has access to, because many AI meeting tools today, still are only work grounded, so they don't have access to the general web information, which means that if, for example, you're scheduling a meeting for next Friday and I'm thinking of doing it on a patio, I can't necessarily say, hey, what's the weather going to be next Friday? First of all, it doesn't know when next Friday is because it doesn't have access to the date. And some of these tools really only can answer questions based on the current meeting transcript. So even if this is a weekly meeting, it's only answering questions about what was discussed today. And it's really important that you understand the limitations of that. And then a lot of standalone tools, like, for example, ChatGPT, it's fantastic. It has access to the web, but it doesn't know anything about your work-specific information. And so you can see where the ultimate AI assistant, the ultimate AI agent would be both work-grounded and web-grounded. Really critical that you understand the difference. and in whatever context you're using AI, understand what information it has access to when it's providing you with answers. So that's the AI Minute for today.
Fantastic. Thank you, Kevin. So we're going to move to the main part of today's show, introduce our guest speaker. So today we're diving deep into the world of generative AI, and we're going to be talking about how it's been transforming the enterprise landscape at breakneck speed. So joining me today is Kevin, our regular industry analyst, and John Arnold, another industry analyst. So welcome, John. How's it going?
Hey, just great. Can you tell if it's me or my digital twin?
What do you reckon, Kevin? Is he real?
I believe he is real, so we're going to see based on the answers, but I always go to John for deep, true analysis. So right now I think it's the real John Arnold in the house.
The Canadians don't fool around.
Well, stand by for a fun show. Today we're going to be keeping this relatively into the context of enterprise communications, collaboration, and CX, or contact center and customer engagement. And both of you have, got decades of experience in these spaces. So I'm really keen to kind of dig into the last 2 years. And we're going to start kind of, I suppose, roughly around about when ChatGPT was released and the world started to realize what generative AI is or was or is. And so first of all, I was doing a ton of research on this and realized that there are a lot of moments in AI in the last 2 years. So a lot have happened, certainly in 2023. I think that was the kind of real start of things as it got going. But I'd like to cast your minds back to November 2022 to start with, when ChatGPT was first launched. And that really felt like that moment, didn't it? Like a big line in the sand. And up to that point, most of us we weren't really thinking about large language models, LLMs, in our day-to-day work. I mean, certainly, even from my perspective, I've never really even heard of an LLM before I'd heard of OpenAI. So, let alone deploying it and playing, testing it and that kind of thing in my business. But then a couple of months later, in January 2023, Microsoft did a deal with OpenAI and invested $10 billion in OpenAI. So that felt like a real seismic shift in terms of kind of where things were going. So my first question to you, Kevin, take this one first, but my first question is how big was that moment, and what was kind of your perspective on things back then?
Yeah, so as you say, Rob, there's lots that's happened in the last 2 years, and it seems like a lot more than 2 years in the AI world has gone by. So the good news is I was able to actually look back to my March 2023 Enterprise Connect presentation to see exactly what I was presenting and what my recommendations and final thoughts were. So certainly, like most of, I think all of us, I was certainly excited by this. Yes, LLMs. I mean, I had always kind of followed AI, and certainly lots of vendors were working with AI in the background, doing noise reduction and things like that. But this generative AI was really new and exciting. I concluded at the end of my March presentation in 2023, AI will be the new battleground. So I suggested that for both UC providers and contact center providers, that this will be where they choose to try to differentiate. And I think that both in the contact center and for UC providers, I think that has indeed come true. And then the second thing that I said is I suggested that a consolidated product suite would favor, vendors for AI, because we all know that data fuels AI. And so when I looked at whether it's the Microsoft ecosystem with, companies having lots of data there, I thought that the big, and that's what I said, the big will only get bigger. And I think we've seen that. There is certainly, if you have more data or you're trying to get more, like we talked about with, let's say, Meta and WhatsApp, trying to somehow do that, or what Reddit's trying to do. Absolutely, AI favors the big getting bigger. So I think that I got both of those predictions right in 2023.
Good stuff, and welcome to the show, John. And thanks for joining us. Cast your mind back. How big was that for you? And how I know you think about the future of work a lot. Where did you see the kind of potential of generative AI back then?
Yeah, thanks, Rob. And yeah, I pretty much agree with Kevin on all that. All that kind of looking back to what we were, excuse me, talking about then. And I as well do an ongoing session at an Enterprise Connect, particularly on speech tech. So when this came out, it was really, it's kind of a manifestation of how the world of speech technology was evolving, because ChatGPT is very much about text and voice. And all of this stuff only works as well as your speech recognition capabilities are. We've been conditioned to this already in the consumer world with search, right? With Bing, with Siri, whatever, Amazon, of course, with Alexa, just speaking. So it's that call and response thing, right? You utter a query, it gives you an answer back, and it's pretty good. And it's really just a way of communicating basically between people and machines. ChatGPT takes it to another level, because the idea of the way speech tech has evolved, the reason why this works well is because we've evolved from basic, like first generation chatbot capabilities, which are very kind of stilted and very binary, whereas conversational AI takes the language capabilities of AI to an entirely different level, where it's now capable of understanding much more than just closed-ended questions. It can address open-ended questions. It can handle some of our anomalies of speech. And as these capabilities grew and conversational AI kind of became the new norm for these interactions, the person and machine interactions got really good. And coming back, we now have machine to person, which is what ChatGPT is about, right? Because it's now giving you something based on kind of the seeds that you've given it to plant now come back. And that opens up new capabilities, because we're not just doing search now. It's actually doing things for us. And that's the generative part about generative AI, right? It's not just the speech recognition. This is a lot like, Rob, the heavy lifting that the PBX vendors had to do to perfect switch telephony back in the 70s and 80s. Once they kind of got that to work, and later on, when VoIP kind of ironed out the bugs of doing packetized voice as opposed to circuit switch voice, and now having it as a data stream instead of a separate form of communication, that changed everything in terms of the reliability of this as the future. And that's what ChatGPT brought, Rob, is kind of AI being good enough to be what the future is going to be, and let us put in the rearview mirror what the kind of first generation chatbot capabilities were. We're kind of beyond that now. And this takes AI to a level where we can almost, not quite, but almost trust what it gives back to us. That kind of sets the seeds for a whole bunch of other stuff. But
And it absolutely does. Yeah, good job, because it absolutely does. The quality is second to none now, isn't it? It's got, from a speech tech point of view, we were struggling for a lot of years. But
and there's two pieces to that. I think people need to understand about what the quality actually means. So first is the quality of the basically straight up speech recognition, right? So you talked in one of your stories about the translation service with Duolingo. If they can't get the basic transcription right, it's not worth doing. So that has to be pretty close to 100% to be worth doing. But the higher level thing, where the generative piece of Gen AI comes in, is the kind of quality of the comprehension. So once you assume it can do speech rec pretty well, now can it comprehend conversations and ideas and detect sentiment? And really, the beauty of human language is that it has so many, especially English, right? As we know, has so many inconsistencies that make no sense when foreigners try to learn our language. They say, what the hell? Why is it read and not read? All those variations. AI has that's where all this $10 billion is going to kind of iron out those bugs so it can understand context and intent, then it becomes a whole new game.
Well, let's zoom into that a little bit, because it was January 2023 when we first started to see enterprise products launch, and it's starting to integrate with generative AI. So Microsoft Teams rolled out AI meeting recaps, I think they call them back then. I think it's still kind of recaps, aren't they? Transcripts and things like that started happening. And NICE launched their CX1 product with ChatGPT integration for their contact center platform. I think we even saw Five9 doing things with call summaries via Agent Assist. And we then saw by March, I think Salesforce launched Einstein GPT for service. And there was a flurry of activity in just a short number of months. I mean, do you remember Slack GPT was announced as well? And then shortly after that, Zoom IQ started to adopt their AI and everything else. And it was really, really fast moving, wasn't it? The pace of innovation was happening. So here's a question. So how much of this do you think was already in motion before ChatGPT launched publicly? And were the vendors, quietly building partnerships and prototypes behind the scenes for months? Or was it more about the plug and play nature of OpenAI's platform that enabled such rapid productization? Kevin, what do you think?
Yeah, so I think it's a great question, and it's interesting to think back. For sure, the vendors were working on AI. I mean, you had whether it was like Cisco with the WebEx AI codec, but it was all what I call the behind the scenes AI. It was background blur and, removing noise and, whether it was on cell phones or what have you. I think what caught people by surprise, the vendors, and I'm sure they're experimenting with generative AI, but it was really the consumer adoption and excitement that was created, via OpenAI's ChatGPT.
Yeah.
And the truth of the matter is, my background is software development from a long time ago on the VIC-20 and Commodore 64 video games. It was really, really easy to call, an OpenAI API or from somebody else, and really just take a meeting transcript if you're already recording and doing some transcription, to then just say, hey, summarize this or rewrite this. So it was simple for vendors to, with, a handful of lines of code, to invoke an AI API. And the excitement from the consumers meant that every vendor really felt that they needed to have an AI story. If you talk to investors at the time, the investors demanded that you, as a organization, as a vendor, had an AI story because you'd get better multiples for your shareholders. So I think they were working on it. They were caught by surprise. The consumer sentiment was fantastic. And so everybody very quickly pivoted and had an AI story.
And John, what stood out to you about the players who moved first? It was pretty crazy back then, but what stood out for you?
Well, I think the point about open source is the speed with which these things can be done forced everyone to kind of jump on right away, because it was just, as you said, the adoption. That's the thing when some of these technologies are so good. Like, you think about when the real breakthroughs happen, it's important because it gets adopted quickly, right? When you think about how fast, WhatsApp developed, when you think about how quickly, even how, going back a ways, but how quickly Android became a standard. Google was an outsider to mobility completely, but yet Android became the standard very quickly. And once that's in place, all this other stuff happens. I think it's good to note that so far in these conversations, the focus on AI is not about automation. That's what it is right now. But back in these kind of early days, even though it's only not even 2 years ago, it's really just about getting the tools to work, basically to communicate the way that humans communicate, but have it being generated by AI. And it's irresistible to all of these vendors because they see the possibilities. They're going to go where the adoption is going to be the greatest, because, where we're coming from here is it's mostly we're talking UCaaS. Some of it is CCaaS, but it's these cloud-based platforms that we have to remember. If you're an IT person, generally when you invest in new technology, Once you deploy it, your job is done. But with UCaaS in particular, the job only begins because you still have to get end users to adopt the platform. If they don't use the tools, it doesn't happen. And when you make the tools better and more convenient to use than what you've already been doing, that's what this level of GPT brings to collaboration, right? When you think about, you mentioned, Kevin, like the meeting transcripts and noise reduction, those are features we didn't have before. Now all of a sudden collaboration is getting more effective. So when you talked about that earlier story, Rob, about, well, some of them regret, that's a pretty strong word, but when it goes too fast and it doesn't work, it's a failed experiment. But when it does work, that's when people get excited. And as you say, it moved and is moving too fast for them not to be in it. And it's happened so quickly that now I think we'd all agree all of these features are just table stakes. No one's talking about meeting summaries anymore. It was a big deal when it came out, but now everyone's got it. It's a little bit like HD voice, right? You said, oh, wow, look at the quality of this for the few handsets that could support it. But you don't go back. Once you've got it, you don't go back. But of course, with the vendors, we should explore this a bit. Let's not forget, okay, Microsoft is charging, but most of the other vendors are giving this stuff away. And I think, the business model for this rests on, okay, is it going to generate new capabilities and revenues for us? Or is it just a defensive play to keep pace, to make sure its Teams doesn't conquer everybody and gives everyone else a chance to still be in the game?
Well, let's fast forward a little bit further into 2023, because that's when things really started to evolve. ChatGPT launched November 22, and later in 23 was suddenly introduced with multimodal kind of solutions, text, images, stronger reasoning capabilities. And around the same time, we saw the rise of plugins and APIs, giving developers more tools to build even deeper integrations. So we also heard around that time Google Workspace Duet AI, if you remember, which was later rebranded as Google Gemini as we know it now. And we also then got Zoom AI Companion, again a rebrand, and then Cisco WebEx AI Assistant later in the year. So tons were happening in the UC space, in the collaboration piece there. And on the CX side, we saw Zoom partner with Claude, Anthropic with their Claude platform. And even Genesys started to roll out kind of capabilities connected to LLMs and whatnot. And I think by the July or August time, Google Contact Center AI was even offering its own generative AI tools across that ecosystem. So it was, pretty fast paced across 2023. It felt like we'd moved beyond that, to your point, John, beyond that simple chatbot functionality, and we really started to see the industry lean into that multimodal AI opportunity, and certainly the early signs of autonomy started to begin. So around the middle of 2023, we started to hear the term AI agents or agentic AI, and it really started to become a buzzword. So my next question is kind of more around that AI agent journey and how significant it was to the AI story, I suppose. Kevin, are we really seeing traction with AI agents now? Have we gone beyond the demo and hype phase? And what's your take on the role of autonomous and agentic AI in contact centers and in everyday workplace collaboration?
Yeah, another great question. So I'm going to say these are early days of AI agents or agentic AI. AI agents right now, they show up much better in demos than they do in the real world. Okay. So first and foremost, I think there's a lot of definitions of what does it mean to be an AI agent. An AI agent in the contact center could just be an agent that gives you answers. But I'm going to say, let's keep it simple. An AI agent is AI that can do something. So it's not just giving you answers. It's not a super search. It can actually do something, for you. So this is where the challenge comes in. And this is where I think people underestimate the challenge. To be able to do something for you, your AI agent has to be connected into all the other systems that actually get things done. So for instance, I want my AI assistant or AI agent to be able to book me flights and hotels, schedule an Uber to pick me up and take me to the airport, email my family and colleagues to let them know where I'll be. Well, you can see, it's easy for it to be able to tell me answers and tell me how to do those things, but that interconnection into, I don't know, whether it's Uber and Expedia and whoever I book, Marriott system, and then my email system. Today, we see lots of demos where, I don't know, an AI will create a ServiceNow ticket. They love to, integrate into that. But there's a lot of work to be done until our AI agents can truly be agentic. And then if we talk about it being autonomous, we'll get to that later, but that's even another bar. So I think we're still very much in the great demos, but moving them to the real world into production is going to take some further heavy lifting that's going to take us several years.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? John, what's your perspective? Is the rubber hitting the road with agentic AI?
Well, but with Kevin though, yes, at a certain level, it can handle things. So, for example, in contact center, agentic AI can still be viable for executing tasks that are kind of solely internal and not terribly customer facing, right? Where there's the most risk when things don't go right. So it could handle, things like, I don't know, an address change, where it's a fairly mechanical thing to do. So, where it differs from what we might have been doing strictly just with ChatGPT or whatever, this allows basically agency for the agent to execute that task end to end with minimal or no human supervision. We're only ready to give that much leash if we're like almost 100% certain. That's why you do it internally without customer facing stuff. But once you can train it on basic tasks, right, that it can execute end to end, that's a game changer, because now you are truly getting the benefits of, again, I said earlier, now this is all about automation. This allows an agentic, bot, agent, whatever you want to call it, to do a task that an agent normally would have done in, earlier times, end to end. Well, that's one less, workflow an agent's got to worry about. And as it learns, as Kevin says, when it starts integrating with external systems, AI agents are still not trusted enough to handle financial transactions, for example. So if we start getting into the FinServ space, no, we're not going there yet. But you can certainly, again, the verticals, I think you'll agree, Kevin, right, are much more interesting, where the workflows can be very granularly defined to work well. Because now we're coming out, of course, in the enterprise with the AI reception, right? So that's the agentic version of a bot in a contact center that becomes now the front desk of a small business. And we saw some pretty good demos of that. But, it's very easy to script those demos to make sure it can do the job. But that's okay. I think the proof of concept is more important to show that we know how it's been done in the past. And you think about in all businesses, small businesses, no one has receptionists anymore, live receptionists. And you can only do so much with an IVR. So I say, okay, I could see an automated assistant doing those things. That's a pretty good step forward. But, obviously we're going to have a lot of hits and misses. It's going to take some time. But to get people thinking along those lines, I think is the big takeaway for all of this, because the concept of agentic AI is pretty powerful. And yeah, we got a long way to go for the really interesting stuff. But you can see the kind of money that vendors are throwing at this to really move it along quickly. I mean, that's where they're going. And, it's interesting. I find that Salesforce is the one that kind of started all of this because they have pretty big designs, I think, on the contact center space getting beyond CRM that they say, you know what, if we can make it agentic here, that was kind of the first lob to get it. The rest of the event, this contact center guys had to catch up really fast because they can't afford to let them have a proprietary technology, so to speak, that gives them competitive advantage. So let's push everybody into this direction, whether they like it or not. Just like what you explained earlier, Rob, with ChatGPT, everyone had to kind of follow suit.
Right.
Well, it's 2025. It does feel like AI agents or agentic AI is still the headline act. At least everyone stopped obsessing over which LLM is best. I suppose that's almost feels like it's moved a little bit more to the background now in terms of which LLM is going to help me solve my problems, or which LLM am I going to use. But there's simply hundreds of them now, and I think even with China's DeepSeek, given AI at a much lower cost or more efficient kind of model. A lot's been happening this year already. At the same time, the landscape is getting more complex, isn't it? I think in AI, we're still trying to figure out how to regulate AI, and although we have seen some big changes there, and we're still in the middle of what it feels like a global chip war, especially now with tariffs and political tensions influencing innovation pipelines. So we've got the usual suspects. We've got OpenAI, we've got Microsoft, we've got Google, we've got Meta pushing ahead. But we're also seeing real momentum from other players like Anthropic, who have got a huge investment from Amazon recently, and xAI's Grok by Elon Musk, and a wave of Chinese vendors also offering enterprise-ready solutions. So my final question for today, Kevin and John, is where does this all go next? Are we at the point where enterprises need to start feeling the real tangible value of AI? Beyond pilots, beyond the hype, because as we've seen already, not every AI move is a success. So what should businesses and tech leaders be thinking about as we head into the rest of 2025 and even look beyond into 2026? Kevin, do you want to take that one first?
Yeah. So a couple things. I just want to highlight like what John said about verticalization. I'm super hyped on, verticalization of AI because like if you give it a narrower scope, you can deliver better results. I mean, so for example, Ring Central has their Air AI receptionist. That's a great path forward. So keep that in mind. The other thing that you mentioned, Rob, that I want to draw attention to is, there was this battle like who is the best LLM. I love this when technology starts to move from kind of the nuts and bolts to saying, hey, ultimately we got to deliver some return on investment. So I think that as we move up the stack and say, it doesn't matter, I don't really care what's in the black box, I care that you're delivering results. I think that I like that shift. I do want to point out that I've never thought that AI is overhyped. I thought that people misapplied it. So it's like if all you have is a hammer in your toolbox, you can pound in some screws and it works okay. But if your job is to remove the screws, you're going to have a struggle with a hammer. And I think that was the initial application of AI. As we said, it was vendors were caught with the, consumers being so excited about AI that they just threw AI, sprinkled a little AI dust everywhere. Everything became AI enabled. But here's what I think is going to happen. True AI assistants or AI agents, they need to be, back to the AI minute, both work grounded and web grounded. And I think that we've got a lot more work to do here so that you're bringing in all of that information, including things like now we're seeing, whether it's ChatGPT or other AI assistants have memory, which really is just meaning, hey, if you asked about these things and made some comments yesterday or a week ago or 2 months ago, like a true AI assistant or an assistant in your business, you'd expect that they remembered, what you taught them last week. So I think that, what we're seeing is organizations should be giving AI tools to their end users so they can start learning about them. They should be providing more training. Training with any technology is always undervalued. and you always get big returns from training. And I think that that's the same in the AI space. And then they should be experimenting, with this agentic or autonomous AI. And to John's point, the perfect place to do that is internally, initially, because you can kind of limit exposure and limit risk. But here's the thing. AI is going to determine winners and losers for industries, and I encourage you not to be a loser. So that means you can't ignore AI. It's going to take some time, but now is really the time to do experimentation. And so back to the Duolingo story, where the CEO says, we're betting in AI. I think that that's the right bet to make. It's going to, if it's not going to be 2025 is not going to be the year where agentic AI becomes everywhere. It's not going to be 2026, but it is coming, and it will be hugely transformative. And your team and your organization will have really powerful humans and really powerful, digital workers, certainly over the next 2, 3, 4 years. So now is the time to start experimenting.
Fantastic. John, the floor's yours. What do you think?
Yeah, well, to add to that, I just think the big message is it's strategic, right? So all enterprises, big and small, had better have an AI strategy or have some form of executive level person responsible for that. Whether this is now a C-suite level priority. You cannot just, because the problem is when we talk about like UCAS or CCAS, there's still this kind of like bubble thing. Well, we're going to use AI for this and this, but every line of business within an organization are pursuing AI initiatives, but that program, that approach is going to be a disaster. You have to have some kind of an overarching strategy that has a consistent approach to AI across the organization. Because like to Kevin's point, you got to be able to draw across, integrations across all kinds of workflows and processes and external partners. And we're not even talking about regulations or compliance yet, but it has to be strategic, kind of a big level thing, and to recognize the speed of innovation here. So Kevin, I don't know if you've done anything with the Vector Institute. They're here in Toronto.
Yeah.
So if you don't know, Rob, they're one of the big research and think tank organizations devoted to AI. You've probably heard of Jeff Hinton. They refer to him as the godfather of AI. These are the people who are behind this organization. And I got to attend a couple of their sessions virtually at their recent event. And the big takeaway for me there, when you start getting into the straight up research side of AI, what they're doing with AI is, yes, they're creating new applications, but they're also utilizing AI in the process of doing the research. So what's happening is when AI is doing a lot of the heavy lifting of the research itself, it happens a lot more quickly. So this is why AI is being used in things like medical research, right? Where you have endless permutations that you have to get through to get the right genome sequencing and all this stuff. It's horsepower. And what they're seeing is that AI is shortening the time it takes to crack the code of whatever problem you're trying to solve. And it has endless capability, right? Scale is one of the big things that AI is good at. And they're seeing this. So in other words, the innovation cycles are going to get faster and faster. You have to think in terms of weeks or months, not years, for AI to have its impact. I think that's a really profound takeaway as a way to look at AI. It's just happening so fast because AI itself is making it fast. We can't rely just on human innovation anymore. AI is just getting too good at this stuff. So that's where it's going.
Amazing. Well, I'm afraid we've run out of time today. A huge thank you to Kevin Kieller and John Arnold for guiding us through some of the most significant moments in the last 2 years of AI's evolution. And thank you, John. Thank you, Kevin.
All right. You're welcome. Thanks, everybody, for watching.
Thank you.
Well, it's clear that generative AI isn't just enhancing the way we communicate, it's redefining the very tools and workflows we use every day. So whether it's in meetings, embedded in agents in contact centers, handling customer interactions, or powering our CRMs and business applications, AI is fast becoming the intelligent layer behind modern enterprise success. So thanks again to our audience for joining us on this journey. If you'd like to connect with us, you'll find our links and our resources in the description below. Until next time, I'm Rob Scott from AI Today. Thanks for watching.